They tried to take everything. Names, languages, families, beliefs, memory. They understood something early. If they could control the body, they could extract labor. But if they could control the spirit, they could erase a people. So slavery was never just about work. It was about breaking identity. Africans arrived in the colonies carrying hundreds of belief systems, different gods, different rituals, different ways of understanding the world. Spiritual life in Africa was not separate from daily life. Faith was woven into birth, death, music, farming, justice, and community. To enslavers, this was dangerous because belief creates strength, and strength resists control. So African spirituality was banned. Drums were outlawed. Languages were punished. Rituals were mocked or violently suppressed. Enslavers claimed they were civilizing, but what they were really doing was stripping people of themselves. Christianity was introduced not as faith, but as a weapon. Scripture was edited. Passages that obedience were emphasized. Stories of liberation were ignored. They taught enslaved people that suffering was God's will, that obedience would be rewarded in heaven, that rebellion was sin. But something unexpected happened. They heard the story of Moses. They saw themselves. They heard about Pharaoh. They recognized their masters. They heard about Exodus, and they understood escape. Christianity did not erase African spirituality. It merged with it. Old rhythms met new hymns. Movement, clapping, moaning, and improvisation survived inside churches. Faith became something enslavers could not fully control. Spirituals were born. Songs that sounded like worship but carried deeper meaning. Songs about rivers that pointed north. Songs about crossing water. Songs about freedom delayed, but promised. Music became a language the overseer could not decode, so people used their bodies, hands, feet, voices. Language was survival. Africans came speaking dozens of tongues. English was forced, but meaning was reshaped. Words bent. Grammar shifted. New ways of speaking emerged. African speech patterns survived inside English. Tone, cadence, emphasis, storytelling. What was called broken English was actually preserved structure. A new language born from survival. Culture adapted. Hair became identity. Clothing became signal. Food became memory. Recipes carried Africa across generations. Rice cultivation knowledge built entire economies. Seasoning, technique, and taste survived even when names did not. Family survived, not in the way the system wanted, but in fragments, in Chosenkin, in shared care when families were torn apart. Community filled the gap. Elders became parents. Neighbors became protectors. Children were raised collectively. This was not weakness. This was strategy. Enslaved women became the backbone of cultural survival. They taught songs. They taught stories. They taught. Meaning, they passed down belief quietly, away from overseers, away from punishment. Motherhood became resistance, raising children to know they were human in a system that called them property. Faith gave people language for pain, but it also gave language for hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope made people endure. Hope made people plan. Hope made people run. Religion was used to justify slavery, but it also exposed slavery's contradiction. A system claiming moral authority while practicing brutality could not be holy. Enslaved people saw this clearly. They knew God could not belong to the whip. So belief was reshaped again. God became protector, not master. Justice became delayed, not denied. Faith became internal, untouchable, and because it lived inside, it could not be confiscated. Culture was not frozen. It evolved. African traditions mixed with new realities. New expressions formed. New identities emerged. Black culture in America was not born from slavery. It survived slavery. Every story told, every song sung, every prayer whispered, every child taught, all of it was defiance. The system tried to erase memory, but memory adapted. It moved through sound, through movement, through faith. And that survival changed the future, because culture creates continuity, and continuity creates people who cannot be erased. By the late 1600s, enslaved Africans had built something powerful under constant attack: a shared identity, a shared language of resistance, a shared spiritual foundation. This is how a people survive the impossible, not by surrendering, but by transforming. Faith did not make slavery acceptable. It made survival possible. Culture did not soften oppression. It exposed its failure, and spirituality did not remove suffering. It preserved humanity inside it. In the next episode, we confront the final truth, that slavery was never a mistake, never temporary, never accidental. It was foundational, an understanding that changes everything. If you want to understand Black America not as broken, but as enduring, subscribe now. Because survival is not passive, it is power.